the 4th year with Cyril. He grew tired of my dullness and predictability. He was swept away by a young, fashionable girl. But he told his friends it was just a one-night thing. When it comes to marriage, of course, I'd choose a sweet girl like Hannah. With the wedding looming, everyone urged me to keep the bigger picture in mind. Jeffrey, the most notorious playboy in the circle, stopped me and said, "Sweet girl, dare to rebel just once." At the wedding 3 days later, Cyril saw the kiss mark on my neck and was so angry he could barely hold his bouquet. I smiled faintly. "It was just a one-night thing, why are you mad? Anyway, you only realize how boring you are when you try someone else, he's much more fun." I had never seen this side of Cyril. Always the refined, gentlemanly air of a prestigious family. But now, his shirt buttons were undone, lounging lazily on the couch. A pretty girl with pink hair boldly straddled his waist and kissed him deeply. He looked tipsy, his eyes filled with lust. But at the last moment, he turned his head, just enough for the kiss to land on his cheek. "Cyril, you're playing this wild, don't you worry about Hannah finding out?" "It's just for fun," he replied casually. "So what if she finds out? Besides, the wedding's already set, the invitations are all sent. She's such a sweet girl, she'll probably just cry about it." Cyril lit a cigarette, smiling as if he didn't care. "I know what I'm doing. I'll still marry a sweet girl like her. My mistress, though, needs to be full of charm to be fun." Laughter erupted, chaotic and messy. Cyril smirked, pinching the soft, delicate face of the girl on his lap. "Change into your ballet practice clothes, show them something." The girl giggled, "But I only want to wear it for you." Cyril smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Be a good girl, don't ruin the mood." The girl pouted and went to change. I stood outside for a while, waiting for someone to finish a call, and then they noticed me. "Cyril's drunk, he mentioned you earlier." I took a step back. "I'll pass. I won't disturb him while he's watching the dance." The person hesitated, not sure what to say. It was probably the first time I showed any anger, and it caught him off guard. As they said, I was known as the sweet girl in our circle. Everyone had heard the rumors about Cyril's wild behavior lately. But every single person, without exception, urged me to endure it. "Every man is a little fickle, at least Cyril really cares about you. Your wedding is so close, you need to think about the bigger picture, the reputation of both families." I couldn't help but laugh. Was I supposed to protect both families' faces, even though I was the victim? "You all have fun, I'll leave. Cyril's just relieving his boredom with them. Don't follow me." I held back my tears, turning quickly to leave. But just as I reached the elevator, someone blocked my way. Wiping my tears, I frowned at the man in front of me. It was Jeffrey, the notorious playboy in our circle. He was wearing a black windbreaker and matching cargo pants, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. His gaze was reckless and bold. In this glamorous setting, his attire seemed out of place. I had heard many unsavory rumors about him. I instinctively took a step back, keeping my distance. "Sweet girl." Jeffrey pulled the cigarette from his mouth, raising an eyebrow at me. "Dare to rebel just once?" I was wearing a light blue dress with a small square collar. My straight hair and subtle makeup hadn't changed in years. I was the epitome of a well-behaved lady in the eyes of the elders. But in private, I was often ridiculed as a helpless, soft target. Jeffrey's sharp features were accented by a fresh scar on his jawline, making his good looks even more rebellious. I hadn't planned on engaging with him. But Jeffrey smiled, his eyes narrowing in mockery. "Forget it, I know you're too scared to do anything, it's not fun." I half turned but then returned to face him. "Who says I'm scared?" Jeffrey tossed his car keys in the air. "Wanna come with me?" I gripped my purse, straightened my back, and entered the elevator without looking at him. Jeffrey laughed softly and followed me in. The moment the elevator doors closed, he grabbed my waist and pulled me into his arms. His scent was completely different from Cyril's. It was thick with raw, intense pheromones, even the cigarette smell felt stronger. I felt a little uncomfortable, coughing lightly. Jeffrey looked down at me. "Such a delicate thing. It's your cigarette smell that's too strong." I frowned, trying to push him away. But Jeffrey only gripped me tighter. "Sorry to make you uncomfortable. I'll shower later." Showering won't help, you'll still smell like smoke. I turned my face away, wrinkling my nose, trying to distance myself from him. Jeffrey chuckled, then suddenly leaned down and kissed me. I'll quit smoking today. Is that okay, my darling? I felt heat rush to my face. I got engaged to Cyril when I was 19, and now it's been exactly 4 years. Jeffrey was the first man, apart from Cyril, to kiss me. By the time we reached the underground garage, the heat hadn't left my body. Jeffrey was driving a Hummer. Once we left the city and hit the winding mountain roads, the car sped up, finally racing to the mountaintop. My heart was pounding, uncomfortable but exhilarating. The sensation was indescribable. Jeffrey opened the car door and helped me out. Can you stand? My legs were a little weak, but I could still walk, so I pushed his hand away and walked forward. Jeffrey didn't insist. The viewing platform at the mountaintop overlooked the entire city. The lights of thousands of homes lay beneath my feet, and above was the vast, endless starry sky. The suffocating frustration inside me seemed to dissipate by half. Jeffrey stood beside me, pulling out a cigarette. Then, as if remembering something, he crushed the cigarette pack and threw it in the trash. I watched this gesture, and somehow, I smiled. What's so funny? Jeffrey's tone was sharp. He turned, reached out to grip my chin. Hannah, when you smile like that, I can't help but want to taste you right here. I had heard that Jeffrey had been constantly surrounded by girlfriends since middle school. He was unstable, always playing around. But his good looks made him irresistible to many girls who cried and begged to be with him. I was a little nervous inside, but tried to act calm. Jeffrey, are you sure you don't have a disease? Why, want me to go to the hospital for a full checkup? Jeffrey held my chin and leaned in, his warm breath grazing my ear. Now you're scared? Don't you think it's a little too late? Hearing him say that, I did feel scared. I pushed him away with all my strength. Jeffrey, I want to go home. Sure. He loosened his grip, his tall, muscular body lazily leaning against the railing. His voice was lazy, with a hint of mischief. Want to go home? Fine, walk back by yourself. I held back my anger, glaring at him, and turned to walk down the mountain. A few days ago, a serial killer escaped. They say he's somewhere on this mountain. He only targets pretty girls. Jeffrey. My step stopped abruptly. A cold wind blew, and I was too scared to care about anything else, rushing back to Jeffrey. He laughed loudly, but then pulled me into his arms. Before I could recover from my fear, Jeffrey held the back of my head and kissed me deeply. At first, I resisted, struggling. I even bit his lip, drawing blood. Hannah. He wiped the blood off his lip, but his gaze turned cold. With red eyes, I felt both scared and wronged. I want to go home. Jeffrey suddenly smiled. Go home? Then keep being a puppet? Hannah, how much can you endure? I froze. Cyril, in the eyes of the elders, was the promising young man with a gentle and refined demeanor. But his true nature was far from that. Everyone urged me to endure, but no one told him not to hurt his future wife. Was it because Cyril's family was more powerful? Why should I consider the overall situation? Just because the invitations have been sent out and the wedding is in 3 days? No one cares whether a puppet is sad or not. A child without a mother actually lost her biological father at the same time. No one loves her, no one supports her, so she has no confidence to cry. Hannah. Jeffrey wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes with his rough fingertips. When he lowered his head to kiss me again, I heard a very soft sentence, "Don't cry, I will be there for you in the future." Jeffrey took me back to his place. He lived alone on the top floor of a luxury apartment in the city center. He had bought and connected 2 adjacent apartments on the top floor, making the space huge, but also very empty. As we walked in, I noticed there didn't seem to be any signs of a woman having been here. He turned off my phone and told me to go take a shower. After I finished, we had a bit of red wine on the terrace. I don't drink much, so I didn't even realize it myself. The drunk version of me turned out to be like this. I pushed open the tie of Jeffrey's robe. I need to check if you're clean. I mumbled under my breath, but my hands didn't stop moving. At first, Jeffrey seemed to try to stop me, but when I shot him a look, he let go. He just stretched out his long legs and half leaned back, letting me do whatever I wanted. Jeffrey's body really was perfect. His skin had a slight tan, and his muscles were tight and smooth. Even in a relaxed state, he had six-pack abs. I reached out and poked them, then moved down. Hannah. Jeffrey grabbed my finger, his voice a little hoarse. Think carefully. Another inch and there's no turning back. Are you scared? Or are you just guilty? I straddled him, patted his abs. Looking down at him from above, are you worried I'll find out you're not clean? Jeffrey suddenly laughed. This laugh was different from the ones before. It was pure, joyful, and heartfelt. My chest fluttered. He really was handsome. Hannah, go ahead and check. He let go of my hand. I had a hard time tearing my gaze away from his face. Then I slowly moved my eyes down, inch by inch, from his stomach. Jeffrey, it looks kind of cute. Jeffrey suddenly coughed. The next moment, he picked me up horizontally. Our bodies sank into the soft bed. Jeffrey locked my hands with his, kissing me a little forcefully. Hannah, you'll know how scary it really is soon enough. Cyril returned to the wedding house at 3 a.m. The little ballerina, the bold and avant-garde girl, had changed into a new outfit and started dancing. The atmosphere in the private room instantly peaked. But his mood started to drop in that moment. It was nearly 2 a.m. Not a single call or text from Hannah. It seemed like he had overindulged, maybe because of the impending wedding, the cage he was about to enter. Hannah might have heard some rumors. But she had a soft temperament, and her family didn't treat her well. She had always relied on him. Just like his friends had said, when she got mad, a little coaxing and she was fine. He knew he'd gone a bit too far, but he wasn't that anxious. Not getting a call or message didn't matter. Hannah probably hadn't gone to sleep yet and was just waiting for him to come home. Suddenly, Cyril felt the girl in front of him seemed a little boring. Hannah had also studied ballet as a child. But when she danced, her expression would never be like this. How to describe it? Pure. Yes, pure. A girl like that was the one he wanted to marry, the one worthy of being his wife. When the driver took him back to the wedding house, the whole building was dark. Cyril furrowed his brow. When he got out of the car, he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. He entered the main building, passed through the living room, and headed for the master bedroom on the second floor. The door was half open. He walked in and turned on the lights. The warm glow of the light filled the room. On the huge bed, the blankets were neatly spread, but Hannah wasn't there. Cyril suddenly felt most of his drunkenness clear up. He walked quickly into the bathroom, checking every room one by one. She wasn't in any of them. Finally, he stopped, dialed Hannah's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Cyril suddenly felt an indescribable frustration. He threw his phone down, tore off his tie, and sat down on the couch. Hannah must have really been angry and gone back to her own place. Yes, she could only go to her parents' house. Suddenly, Cyril felt at ease. Her family would definitely urge her to come back because they were looking forward to the wedding. He was tired, his head pounding. If Hannah had been home, she would have made him soup, given him a massage, run a bath for him. But she wasn't there tonight. It didn't matter though, at the latest, by tomorrow morning. Her family would personally bring her back. And this time, he felt a little guilty, so he would properly make it up to her. He would give her enough face in front of her family. She was easy to coax, he knew that well. When I woke up, it was already nearly noon. The house was quiet, and I had no idea where Jeffrey had gone. I lay in bed a little longer, before lazily getting up. After washing up, I went to the terrace to get some air and saw Jeffrey down in the garden, washing a heavy motorcycle. The sunlight was beautiful, and the spray from the high-pressure water gun even created a faint rainbow. But the most eye-catching thing was still Jeffrey. His golden tan, tight muscles, smooth lines, and perfect shape. He wore simple jeans, the waistband slightly loose, exposing his solid and powerful abs. It was a kind of vitality-filled, wild sensuality. I couldn't help but think back to last night's madness. His performance in bed later matched his appearance and personality. I couldn't even remember how many times I passed out. And Jeffrey just kept asking, "Hannah, do you like it?" My cheeks were burning when I realized Jeffrey had turned off the water and casually looked up at the second floor. When our eyes met, my face flushed even more. I instinctively tried to back away, but Jeffrey called my name, Hannah. Leaning against the motorcycle, he casually swept his damp hair back. That handsome face was fully exposed. Under the sunlight, he smiled at me with a carefree, almost smug look. That kind of self-satisfaction made me want to grit my teeth. But what surged up inside me was a bittersweet feeling. I glared at him before turning and going back into the room. When I came downstairs after changing, Jeffrey was already waiting for me at the dining table. "You must be hungry, let's eat first." He naturally stood up and pulled me to sit beside him. Every dish was exactly to my taste. It surprised me a little. But my appetite wasn't great. 3 days from now, it would be my wedding to Cyril. Over the years, my family's business had relied heavily on Cyril's family. To put it bluntly, my family needed this marriage, not Cyril's family, and certainly not me. But no one cared about that. "Not hungry?" Jeffrey noticed I was feeling down. And he set down his chopsticks. "Want me to take you out to eat?" "Jeffrey." I poked at the porridge in my bowl, lost in thought. "In 3 days, it will be my wedding. You still want to go back?" Jeffrey looked at me without any expression. "Hannah, do you really like him that much?" I couldn't help but laugh at myself. Like? Maybe, I used to. When we both gave our hearts to each other at the beginning. How could there not have been real feelings? But later, when one of us grew tired, how could we not feel it? "Jeffrey." I looked up at him, my eyes a little red, but still smiling. "Can you let me have these next 3 days in peace?" Jeffrey seemed like he wanted to laugh, like he wanted to smoke a cigarette. But he couldn't find his pack. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. After a while, he slowly spoke. "And what about 3 days from now?" 3 days from now, you'll watch me go back and marry him? Just pretend this was a dream? Are you not happy, Jeffrey?" I asked softly, but there was no confidence in my voice. Jeffrey smiled this time. "Hannah. Of course I'm happy. Then it's a win-win situation, isn't it?" I tried to sound nonchalant. "Win-win." Jeffrey murmured softly, his gaze fixed on my face. His smile changed again, becoming the same one from before. "Hannah, it's all up to you. As long as you're happy." That night, Jeffrey took me out for a ride on his motorcycle. We sped through the whole city, oblivious to everyone around us. Hidden under my helmet, I didn't have to worry about anything. I had never felt so free, like my soul was soaring. When I waved my arms and shouted loudly, without a care for my image. Hannah, who had always been wrapped in layers of tradition, seemed to shed yet another layer of restraint that had bound her. And I didn't know that while I was relishing my last bit of freedom, my fiancé, Cyril, who had long since stopped caring about me, was getting upset because I had been out of touch for an entire day and night. The last time I tried calling Hannah, but her phone was still off. Cyril stood up from our marriage suite and left, going out for a late-night gathering with friends. The girl who had been dancing ballet that day was Kelly. At first, Cyril had lost interest and left halfway through. And Kelly thought he wouldn't come back for her. But unexpectedly, in the dead of night, Cyril showed up at her school to pick her up. As they left the dorm, a wicked thought crossed Kelly's mind. Cyril was generous, but he was about to get married. Kelly could sense that Cyril's interest in her was just a passing fling. One day, he would discard her like an old shoe. But Kelly knew she could never find another man as well off as Cyril. She wanted to get something big out of this, to secure a life of luxury with a rich husband. Even if she couldn't have his child, she could still take advantage of the situation and ask for a large sum of money. After leaving the dorm, Kelly took out the condoms she had prepared earlier and punctured each one. Perhaps because she was still a student, Cyril wasn't too cautious with her. She knew this was her chance, and she had to make sure to seize it. After a few drinks, Cyril still seemed uninterested. "Did you guys fight after you got home last night?" Cyril glanced at the man lounging on the sofa. "Did she dare argue with me?" "Well, I thought she might have gotten so mad when she saw you messing around with that girl yesterday that she cried. When you came back late, she was probably ready to argue with you. But it looks like she's got an amazing temper, she's been able to put up with it." Cyril suddenly put down his drink. Hannah came by last night? Yeah, I ran into her while I was stepping out to take a call. We said a few words. She cried? Looks like it, her eyes were really red. Cyril felt most of his anger melt away. So, this time, she was actually jealous and upset. That's why she had gone into hiding and turned off her phone. Cyril's mood improved, and suddenly, Kelly seemed a lot more appealing. This girl smelled so good tonight that it almost made him lose control. Cyril pulled her into his arms, and Kelly straddled him. Mr. Cyril. You won't leave me tonight, right? He pinched Kelly's cheek. Tonight's the last time. Let's have some fun. Why the last time? Because I'm getting married the day after tomorrow. What does marriage have to do with it? Doesn't that mean you won't play around anymore? Cyril chuckled lightly and stood up with Kelly in his arms. Of course, once I'm married, I won't be playing around anymore. He looked back at the people in the room. You all heard that. He grinned, looking a little reckless, but with an odd seriousness in his tone. From now on, I'll have only one woman, my wife. While Cyril was being reckless with Kelly, Jeffrey took me to a small competition. The racers each brought their own girlfriends. Naturally, Jeffrey brought me. Jeffrey, what's with the exception this time? Yeah, you've never brought a woman before. Jeffrey raised his helmet as if to strike. The guy shouted and ducked behind me, help. I paused for a moment, instinctively wanting to explain. But Jeffrey glanced at me and pulled me over. Don't bother her, she's shy. Ah, so you're soft-hearted after all. That's because Hannah's so beautiful. Alright, the race is starting. Jeffrey ignored the others, grabbed the helmet, and put it on me. The speed might be a bit fast. If you're scared, just call it off. I'm not scared. Jeffrey looked at me and grinned. Then if you are, hold on tight to me. I'm not scared. I didn't scream once the whole way here. Jeffrey didn't say much, just smiled. When the race began, I realized the previous part was nothing. As the speed increased, and we drifted through sharp turns, I couldn't help but scream and clutch Jeffrey's waist. Hannah, are you scared? In the gusting wind, Jeffrey shouted at me. I was terrified, but I still squeezed my eyes shut and yelled, I'm not scared. Jeffrey's laughter was wild and carefree, echoing in the fierce wind. Hannah, hold on to me, hold on tighter. I obediently clung to him, and the bike shot to its maximum speed. Without a doubt, Jeffrey took first place again. When we stopped at the finish line, he lifted me off the bike. My legs were weak, and I couldn't stand. He held me tight and took off my helmet. The bright light from the surroundings disappeared in an instant. Only the distant, faint stars above us remained. Jeffrey lowered his head and kissed me deeply. Hannah, let's elope. Do you dare? His eyes were intense, and the scar on his jaw made him look even more wild. I could feel the burning love in his gaze. Maybe it was love. No one could resist his charm. Not even the shy and obedient Hannah. For a second, I really wanted to say yes. To leave everything behind without a care. Even if it meant living a wandering life with no fixed home. It would be better than being treated like an object. But reality was harsh. The last bit of reason still kept me grounded. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood on tiptoe and kissed him. Jeffrey, I want you. The stars atop the mountain still glimmered faintly. But down at the foot of the mountain, it was already dark. Everything was quiet. Only the occasional muffled moans from the car under the tree broke the silence. In the spacious back seat, Jeffrey sat back with his shirt partially open. One hand was protectively on my head. But soon, I lost all strength. I melted into his chest, soft and wet. Jeffrey chuckled, brushing my damp hair off my forehead. Tired already? I had no strength to speak, but my mind was clouded. That sweet little thing, why was it getting scarier by the day? I felt like I was burning up with fever. Sweating uncontrollably, trembling. Jeffrey rolled over, pinning me beneath him. His tall, muscular frame was powerful and strong. It was then I realized I was drawn to strength. I liked the feeling of being completely dominated, liked Jeffrey's dominance. But it was only with me that he showed his softness. We used to just nod at each other. We lived in the same city, but only had a few encounters. The closest we had ever been was these past 2 days. But it felt as if he had given me an overwhelming sense of security. Despite his face that looked like a flirt, and the reputation of being reckless, there was something about him that made me trust him. I closed my eyes and surrendered to my senses. That night, Jeffrey and I reached the peak of passion. I don't remember when it ended. I just remember when everything settled into peace. I sat in Jeffrey's arms, wrapped in his jacket. We silently embraced, kissing gently. Waiting for the morning. Waiting for everything to return to the starting point. The last day, I spent it at Jeffrey's house. When I woke up, it was already 2 in the afternoon. I took a relaxing bath. Standing in front of the sink, about to dry my hair, Jeffrey walked in without a word, simply taking the blow dryer from my hands. By the time my hair was half dry, I suddenly felt like I was about to cry. Jeffrey set the blow dryer down, cupped my face in his hands, and bent down to kiss the tear from the corner of my eye. In the mirror, I saw the faded red string on his left wrist, tied in a kind of knot that looked familiar. Have you been wearing this bracelet for a long time? Yeah, about 4 years. Which girl gave it to you? Jeffrey smiled. Not a girl, a fortune teller gave it to me as a good luck charm. I think I had one like that too, but I lost it somewhere. Hannah. Jeffrey lowered his head, his forehead gently touching mine. Are you leaving? Yes. I didn't dare to look up at him, just softly brushed my fingers across the scar on his chin. How did you get hurt here? Racing accidents happen all the time. Be careful next time. I forced a casual smile. After all, with such a handsome face, you don't want a scar. Is it just my face that's handsome? My body is nice too. You're pretty good in bed, a lot of tricks. Guess there's some benefit to dating so many girls. Hannah, I've never been in love before. Jeffrey seemed uncomfortable explaining, frowning slightly. You probably won't believe me, but I've never really been interested in women. Why? They're too noisy. Jeffrey looked down at me, brushing away the tear hanging from my eyelash. Hannah. I'll wait for you outside the hall tomorrow. Don't worry, I won't chase you. If you don't show up, I'll never appear in front of you again. Jeffrey. I wanted to say, don't do this. People already see you through colored glasses. If you do something like this, your reputation will be completely ruined. After all, I'm engaged to Cyril. Everyone knows I'm going to marry him. Hannah, we only live once. I hope you live freely, without any restraint. When Cyril found out I had returned to the bridal room, he quickly came back too. He still smelled of alcohol, looking tired and worn out. He threw his suit jacket on the hallway floor. Hannah. He looked at me with a tenderness I hadn't seen in a long time. Baby. He crouched down in front of me and took my hand. Tomorrow's our wedding. From now on, let's live well, okay? I looked at the man in front of me. I couldn't deny that I had once liked him. Once held expectations for him. Growing up ignored and unloved in my family, I had always hoped that my future husband would love me wholeheartedly. I had fantasized about a marriage where Cyril and I would grow old together, taking care of each other. But sadly, fantasy is just that, fantasy. I gently pulled my hand away. Go take a shower and rest. What about you? I need to rest too, have to get up early tomorrow. I stood up and walked toward the door. My car's coming soon, and according to the rules, I have to stay at my own place tonight. I'll see you off. Cyril acted like the gentlest, most considerate husband, personally escorting me to the car. I sat in the car, watching him stand in the night, watching me drive away. I didn't know why he put on such a passionate act, it seemed unnecessary. My phone suddenly beeped, interrupting my thoughts. I opened the message from an unfamiliar number. Miss Hannah, I didn't want to disturb you. But Cyril has been too ruthless. I only wanted his money, but now I've been fired, my reputation is ruined, and I've lost everything. Miss Hannah, Cyril said he doesn't love you anymore. He married you because you're pure, you're his first and only woman. Believe me, after you marry him, he won't change. Because, Miss Hannah, you can't be like me. After reading the text, I opened the photo. Just a quick glance, and I shook my hands and turned it off. In Cyril's eyes, as long as he paid, he could do whatever he wanted with those girls. Should I thank him for still respecting me as his wife? Even though he no longer loved me, and didn't do anything disgusting to me? On the day of the wedding, I woke up early and made a final decision. After getting ready, I took a few documents from the safe in my room. Then I knocked on my father and stepmother's door. My biological mother came from a scholarly family but passed away shortly after giving birth to me. She left me a small portion of family shares and some jewelry given to her by my grandfather when she married. I kept the pair of white jade bangles she loved most, which she never parted with. The rest, I gave to them. You raised me for 23 years, so consider these things as my way of repaying your care. My father and stepmother were both surprised, because they had always wanted the inheritance my mother left for me. But I never agreed to give it up, feeling that it was the last thing my mother left me, something I should protect. But now, I realized. My mother had died from depression, which meant this place wasn't a good place to be. But as they always say, since I've enjoyed the wealth and protection for over 20 years, I should make sacrifices for the family. Now that I've given everything to them, I no longer owe them anything. Cyril's family helped my family's business, but it was my father and stepmother who benefited, as well as my stepbrother. So, I don't owe Cyril either. As for the mess they left behind, let them sort it out. My father, unaware of my plans, was happily praising me. You're getting married, you've finally learned to appreciate your parents. My stepmother smiled warmly. From now on, you'll be Cyril's wife, things will be different, your mother would be proud. I smiled but didn't say much. Remember, once you're married, no more childish behavior. You've been disappearing without your phone for days, that's too reckless. Luckily Cyril didn't get angry. If he had cancelled the wedding, you'd regret it. After marriage, you need to hold on to Cyril's heart. Help out more with your father's business, and your life will be easier. My father looked at me, his gaze full of satisfaction. Perhaps in his eyes, I was just his most successful product. Not his daughter. A real person, with feelings, sadness, and pain. The wedding is starting in just 30 minutes. I took off the shawl I was wearing. The wedding dress is beautiful and intricate, revealing my shoulders, neck, and entire back. The makeup artist smiled and said, "Miss Hannah, let me cover the marks here for you." She pointed to the kiss marks on the side of my neck. You and Mr. Cyril really are affectionate. I shook my head. No need, it's fine as it is. The makeup artist then adjusted my veil and dress. She handed me the bridal bouquet. I held the bouquet and stood up. The white jade bangles my mother used to wear are now on my wrist. As I stood up, they clinked together, making a soft sound. The heavy fog in my heart seemed to be cleared away by an invisible hand. Bright sunlight streamed through the gap. I knew, from this moment on, everything would change. As I walked out, my phone vibrated lightly. It was a text from Jeffrey. "Hannah, I'm waiting for you." I didn't reply, just put the phone back in my purse and walked out of the makeup room. In the distance, I saw Cyril. And he saw me too. I saw the surprise and joy in his eyes. The handsome groom, with his elegant bearing, looked even more charming today, as if the spring breeze had made him even more handsome. I stopped in my tracks, and for a moment, I seemed to be transported back to the year we got engaged. It happened to be the anniversary of my mother's death. Cyril went with me to the cemetery. I had made a lucky bracelet by hand, but he didn't believe in such things, and it seemed he didn't cherish my gesture either. He just looked at it for a moment but didn't wear it. I was a bit disappointed, but I also knew most men didn't like these things. It was normal. I shouldn't have forced him to conform to my preferences. That red string ended up being hung on the wishing tree outside the cemetery. It hung next to my wish tag. To this day, I still clearly remember the wish I made that day. May I find a person who loves me, and may we never part, growing old together. Suddenly, my vision blurred, and Cyril's face became unclear. I had truly liked him before. The feelings back then were real. So I have no regrets. But now, I've truly let go. If someone wants to be the good girl, let them. I've never had a rebellious phase. But if I really want to rebel once, it's a bit scary. When Cyril walked up to me, holding the groom's bouquet, the smile on his face froze awkwardly. He saw the kiss marks on the side of my neck. They were scattered and uneven in depth. And he remembered we hadn't been together for a long time. His expression grew strange, slowly twisting, and even the bouquet almost fell from his hands. Hannah, what is this? What did you do, Hannah? Who have you been with these past 3 days? His voice was hoarse, and anger was spreading in his eyes. I couldn't help but laugh softly. It was just a one-night stand. Why are you so mad? Or is it only okay for you, but not for me? A one-night stand? Cyril repeated, almost in disbelief, and suddenly threw the bouquet to the ground. The surrounding crowd was shocked into silence by this sudden outburst. The elders from both families looked over. I raised an eyebrow and calmly smiled. Yeah, didn't you do the same thing? Pretty addictive, right? Hannah. I slowly took a step back. I've tried it too. You're actually kind of boring, not as playful as him. So. I placed the bouquet on the ground and looked at him with a deeper smile. Cyril, I'm not marrying you anymore. When I said this, a brief buzzing sound rang in my ears. Then, it was as if I had gone deaf, the whole world became eerily quiet. But after the silence, the world came alive again. I felt the last layer of my cocoon completely peel away. My body and soul were incredibly free. I turned and walked out. The expressions of the people around me were priceless. My father and stepmother seemed completely stunned, standing there motionless. It wasn't until I had walked far away that my father's angry shout echoed. But I didn't look back. The intricate train of my wedding dress was now held in my hands. I had secretly changed into comfortable sneakers instead of the high heels. I started running across the smooth, lush lawn. I ran through one archway after another, entwined with roses. When I finally reached the large gate, I stopped and looked back. The noisy crowd seemed like a ridiculous world from another place. Once I walked through that gate, I would never look back again. When Cyril chased after me, I was just getting on the back of Jeffrey's motorcycle. He was absolutely furious, while I remained calm and casually flipped him the bird. The motorcycle roared to life and sped off, and neither Jeffrey nor I seemed to care whether Cyril followed us. He took me through the bustling city, and after who knows how long, he suddenly stopped. We had arrived at a unique private custom studio. Jeffrey led me inside, where a beautiful makeup artist brought out a handmade wedding dress. It was a very simple yet elegant design, with subtle ballet elements woven into it. I immediately fell in love with it. Jeffrey urged me to go try it on. Once I had changed, the makeup artist helped me take down my hair and redo my makeup and styling. When I stepped out, Jeffrey's gaze made the makeup artist laugh. Do you like it? I twirled, lifting the skirt and striking a very classic ballet pose, smiling at Jeffrey. He just stared at me, and suddenly his eyes grew moist. Jeffrey, what's wrong? I was a little surprised. After a long pause, he seemed to regain his composure. Hannah, do you remember how long it's been since you last danced? I froze. To be precise, ever since I got engaged to Cyril. My father and stepmother had forbidden me from dancing. They said that I had to integrate into Cyril's family now. And performing on stage wasn't suitable for my position. With a few casual words, they crushed my dreams and aspirations. At that time, I was just 19, used to being obedient and compliant. I gathered the courage to ask for one chance. But after being turned down, I just quietly cried alone. I simply accepted the fate that had been handed to me. Later, during the best months of my relationship with Cyril, I asked him if I could still dance ballet in the future. What did Cyril say? You'd be better off just being a proper lady. Ballet is so hard, just look at how your feet have deformed. Don't you think it looks ugly? At that time, I liked him so much, and he was all that mattered to me. A girl always wants to be perfect in the eyes of the one she likes. I was no different. For a long time after, I even avoided letting Cyril see my feet. Hannah, do you know? Just now, you were glowing. The moment a tear fell, Jeffrey held me tightly. I want you to be the dazzling, radiant Hannah. Just like the first time I saw you dance, shining brightly and unstoppable. You've seen me dance? To be exact, I've seen every single one of your performances. Jeffrey and I went to many places. We didn't have a wedding, but it felt like we had traveled the world together as if we were already married. That day, when we left, Jeffrey took with him many beautiful dresses. It seemed like he particularly liked me dressing up beautifully to visit every beautiful place in the world. I had no idea when he started preparing, or how long he had been at it. And perhaps I'll never know the full extent of his thoughtfulness. So, what was he feeling when he was preparing all of this? I couldn't bear to imagine. But fate had been kind, and in the end, I didn't miss it. When we returned, it was already deep autumn. 2 months had passed since the wedding. But it was clear that the storm hadn't yet passed. Cyril's family had directed their anger at my father, suppressing his business at every turn. And Cyril's reaction went far beyond what I had imagined. He gave his only media interview. And in it, he said, "My wife, Hannah, was maliciously manipulated, and that's why she did something foolish. She's innocent and naive, a well-known good girl. Everyone knows Jeffrey's reputation. I don't know what means he used to deceive my wife and run away with her. I won't let this go, but as for my wife, Hannah, I'm willing to give her one last chance. As long as she comes back, I will not hold this against her." His deep affection was almost heart-wrenching. Once those words were spoken, Jeffrey, who was already infamous, became the target of everyone's scorn. People were convinced that I, the obedient girl, had been tricked by Jeffrey. And Cyril, offering me a chance to come back, meant that I should be grateful to the heavens. If it were the old me, I would have been terrified. Afraid of ruining my reputation, afraid the stain would never wash off. Afraid of being criticized and insulted, afraid of dishonoring my deceased mother. But now, I didn't care about those empty titles. The day I came back, I met with Cyril. "Do you remember Kelly?" I got straight to the point. Cyril's face changed. How could he forget? That woman had tried to trap him with a child, using deceitful means. Honestly, he had seen many such schemes before. And easily saw through hers. Kelly's plan failed, and he used some tactics to get her expelled from school. This matter had already faded without a trace. Cyril seemed surprised that I knew about it. "If you don't want your family or the media to learn about your dirty little secrets with her, then stop letting the media spread those rumors that damage Jeffrey's reputation." I showed Cyril one of the photos. "You probably don't want these to be seen, do you?" Cyril's face darkened with anger and surprise. "So this is just about Jeffrey? Hannah, do you really care that much about him?" "I'm just telling the truth. Jeffrey didn't manipulate me or deceive me. Everything I did because I wanted to." "What about your reputation?" "I don't care." "What about your mother? Don't you care about that?" I stood up and smiled. "My mother would probably prefer me to not be a puppet of obedience. But can you really rely on a man like Jeffrey? Do you know how outrageous his past was? Is it more outrageous than yours? You've got such a good reputation, but what's the reality? You're too naive. All men are the same. They all go through a phase where they get tired and bored. So should I just close my eyes and keep enduring it? And what if Jeffrey becomes like that one day?" "He won't." "How can you be so sure?" "I was sure, because I just knew. Maybe it was the red string on my wrist that I hadn't taken off for 4 years. Maybe it was the diary hidden in his study, filled with my name, page after page. Maybe it was the hundreds of photos he took, capturing every one of my performances. Maybe it was the way his gaze was always focused and sincere. Maybe it was the way he gave me the courage to pursue my own dreams. A good partner makes the other person shine brighter. Cyril just wanted me to be a good wife and mother. Trapped in a beautiful house, a beautiful ornament on display. But Jeffrey let me become a carefree, confident child. I could just run forward, and he would always be behind me. The year Jeffrey and I registered our marriage, Kelly, who had disappeared for so long, suddenly did something big. Maybe life had been too harsh on her. Or maybe she couldn't let go of her deep hatred for Cyril. Kelly used those photos to demand a huge sum of money. Then she disappeared without a trace. Overnight, those photos spread throughout the capital. Cyril's reputation was ruined, he was abandoned by his family, and replaced by someone else. When people traced the timeline, our reputation naturally began to reverse. But through it all, Jeffrey and I remained unaffected. After a laugh and a casual conversation, we no longer cared. On the day we received our marriage certificate, I took Jeffrey to my mother's grave to lay flowers. Before we left, he told me to go to the car first, saying he had a few words to say to my mother. I didn't know what he wanted to say, but I let him do it. While waiting for him, I went back to the wishing tree. I found the wish tag I had hung there years ago. The bracelet had been stolen by Jeffrey, but the wish tag was still there. What I didn't expect was that there was another tag beside mine. It had been securely tied to mine with a silk thread. The handwriting on it was strong and bold, and I immediately recognized it as Jeffrey's. He wrote 2 sentences. "Hannah, can you see me earlier?" I held the wish tag, and tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. People came and went, the sounds of the crowd all around. I heard someone call my name loudly. I turned around, and there he was, Jeffrey. He stood on the steps, wearing a white shirt and black pants, handsome and eye-catching. The moment he saw me, his eyebrows and eyes were covered with a gentle smile. I also smiled with tears in my eyes, and waved to him vigorously. "Jeffrey. I see you. And,